Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the easy money policy at the Fed were central to the housing boom and bust. And they are left unaddressed in the Dodd-Frank approach. When you add things in like excessive leverage in the financial sector and the over-reliance on the failed rating agencies, you have a recipe for disaster. And I will add that the Fed came to the Congress and suggested to us in 2004 and 2005 that there was risk, systemic risk, with Fannie and Freddie. And what they asked for was an amendment that would allow them, as regulators, to deleverage these portfolios that were being built up in Fannie and Freddie, in our GSEs, our government-sponsored enterprises. The leveraging was in excess of 100 to 1. These institutions were involved in arbitrage. And it was Congress that gave them the wherewithal to do this and prevented the regulators from going in and forcing these institutions, these government-sponsored enterprises, to deleverage the size of these portfolios. You can imagine the reaction from officials at the Fed when we turned a deaf ear in Congress. As a matter of fact, I want to point out that in the Senate, we had legislation from Senator Hagel written by the Fed that would allow that authority to regulate for systemic risk, to give them, the regulators, the ability to deleverage these portfolios. That bill went out of committee, but Senator Chris Dodd opposed it on the floor, opposed it coming to the floor, and as a consequence, the bill never came up. Although it passed committee, it never came up in the Senate. On this side of the House of Representatives, we brought there was a bill that came to the floor, and I put in the amendment that Chuck Hagel had carried in the Senate. Again, the amendment that I introduced was written by the Federal Reserve in an attempt to give them the ability to regulate for systemic risk at Fannie and Freddie, because they had warned that the consequences we faced was a systemic economic collapse. And certainly that's exactly where this collapse began. It was in the housing market. It was with the collapse of Fannie and Freddie, the loss of about $1 trillion in value.